Cigarettes were the first thing that I was introduced to.
Alcohol and cigarettes,
Drinking, smoked pot,
Mushroom,
ecstasy,
anything I could get my hands on as well.
prescription drugs,
liquid acid,
Heroin,
cocaine,
Percocet, Percodan,
Vicodin, Valium.
and then God knows whatever the marijuana was laced with.
Your brain at 20, I would think this is a 70-year-old's brain.
Teenagers, adults, they have no clue that when they're smoking pot, they're actually damaging their brain.
Everything that I saw in school about it, I found out one day that it's all true and it's all happening to me.
When your brain works right, you work right.
I'd like to just be able to think normally.
What we're looking at here is a healthy brain.
I'm just worried that my brain cells are going to be gone and they're never coming back.
And this is a cocaine brain. So the real question is, which brain do you want?
Dr. Daniel Amen is a psychiatrist, brain imaging expert, best-selling author, and medical director of the Amen Clinics. He has pioneered the use of brain imaging in clinical psychiatric practice and is a noted expert in the field of the brain and behavior. Dr. Amen's breakthrough research and insights provide hope and more effective treatment for millions of people today.
I spent the last 14 years of my life looking at the brain. We've done 21,000 scans. And one of the first things that I learned is that toxic things like alcohol, drugs, nicotine, much caffeine actually lower overall functioning in your brain. Most people never, ever learn that their brain matters, that the actual moment-by-moment functioning of the brain matters. So what we're going to do today is actually talk about the brain with a number of kids who've done drugs, kids who haven't done drugs. And what you'll see today is that when we image the brain, we can actually demonstrate damage to the brain. I mean, so it's really clear why you shouldn't use drugs, is because they damage your brain, and we can prove it by looking.
My first experiences with any type of drugs or alcohol were cigarettes. Cigarettes were the first thing that I was introduced to. I was actually in 5th grade, so I started out pretty young.
I have never used drugs before, ever. The only time I ever had anything to drink was when I went to Italy, and everybody was just kind of almost wasted the entire time. But that was about it.
I used drugs since I was about 14. First time I wanted to use drugs, I went out on my own. I wasn't pressured by anybody. When asking around at school, school seemed to be a great place to get drugs.
I've never tried using drugs, mostly because I just never had a desire to. It didn't seem like a smart thing to do. It didn't seem like a cost-effective thing to do. My parents would kill me. And anyone that I know who had used drugs did not have good experiences and didn't make good choices because of it.
I turned into a real bad alcoholic because at the time I didn't realize until later, like maybe 4 or 5 months, I was just drinking, you know, like go to a friend's house, I would take, 3 or 4 drinks before I went there. I would have to take drinks before I went anywhere. I would take drinks at night, drink all day long, and that kind of got ugly after a while, because I would wake up and I would drink to get rid of the hangover, so it was constantly drunk. And then eventually when I was driving to school, I was shaking. I had the drunk shakes, and it was like, I wonder why I'm shaking. I didn't realize at the time that you get shakes from the drunk, from drinking so much.
I've used various prescription drugs, antidepressants, Vicodin, Valium.
Smoked pot, drank alcohol, heroin.
I wanted to keep it from my mother because I didn't want to have to go and tell my mom, I'm a heroin addict.
Cocaine, crystal meth.
All sorts of pills, Valium, Klonopin, Xanax, Vicodin, Percocet, Percodan, the whole slew of pills.
Ecstasy.
Liquid acid.
And then God knows whatever the marijuana was laced with.
It was quite a bit of things.
Your brain's involved in everything you do. How you think, how you feel, how you act, how well you get along with other people. Has to do with the moment-by-moment functioning of your brain. So if you just think about how you do in school, has to do with how your brain works. How you do in your relationships with your parents, with your friends, with your love, has to do with how your brain works. How you do in sports. How good you are at volleyball, how good you are at tennis, how good you are at football. That's all controlled by your brain.
At the beginning of my high school career, I moved, did a big move just to another country, and I was not happy about that at all. And there were just some really hard days in that time when I really struggled to find a way to cope with that. I never really considered drugs as an option. Didn't know of any way that I had access to them, but also never tried to come up with one, never looked for a way to use them. But it was a struggle to find ways to deal with that and to find an outlet for that frustration and depression.
It was a great escape from everything. I mean, high school's hard. High school's hard, middle school's hard, growing up's hard. You know, I never really had triggers like most of my friends. Most of my friends would go, hey, dude, I gotta get drunk this weekend, man. My parents have been yelling at me all weekend, or all week, and my girlfriend broke up with me, or anything like that. And for me, it was just more out of habit than anything. Always gonna do it. Always did it. Always did it.
At that time, life was just kind of boring.
Everyone has something in their life that they don't like. And I feel that whatever drug that they're using is a way for them to forget about that.
You want to rebel, you want to be cool, you feel depressed, you don't want to self-medicate. There's a slew of reasons, many different reasons.
When your brain works right, you work right. And when your brain has trouble, you have trouble in your life. If we looked at a healthy brain, what we'd see is this nice, beautiful, full activity brain. If we looked at a brain of someone who had a brain injury, or a brain of someone who used heroin, we'd see overall decreased activity in your brain. So when your brain works right, you work right. When your brain is troubled, you have trouble in your life.
And you've all known people who've had trouble, right? Trouble in school, trouble at work, trouble in relationships. And nobody ever thinks about your brain, but it controls absolutely everything. And that's why one of my goals is to teach people to love their brains. Sounds stupid, right? But if you don't love your brain and you don't take care of it, you're going to have a lot more trouble in life.
My son Seth is 17, and he's a junior in high school. He's active in the football program.
My mom is understanding, she's intelligent, she's relatively easy to be around.
He's charming, he's good looking.
She gives me a lot of freedom and she trusts me for the most part.
And he's wonderful.
Sometimes she gets a little overprotective.
And sometimes he has really bad judgment.
That's just her being a mom though, because that's how most parents are.
For example, a number of months ago, I was headed out on a business trip.
She was going to Puerto Rico, and I'm like, okay, she's gonna be out of town for a long weekend.
So a lot of things had to be set up before I left. And I sat down with Seth and talked to him about no parties, no alcohol.
She basically went through a list of things, kind of the stuff that you hear every day during like health class or whatever, DARE and all that stuff. Just, this is what can happen if you have a party. People could drive home drunk and this and this and this. And if something bad happens, that she could get in trouble.
And of course, Seth at 17 said, "Don't worry, Mom, don't worry, nothing will happen."
And that's right around the time of my friend's birthday. And he's like, you know what, this is what you could do for your gift to me. You could throw me a little shindig at your house.
And he told me, "Don't worry, Mom, I know what can happen. I wouldn't throw a party."
I was like, okay, I'll just have a small little one. It shouldn't be that big of an issue, and if it's small, she won't find out about it.
Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry.
So we were just gonna drink a little and have a little fun at my house while my mom was out of town. I didn't think it was a big deal. And he goes to another school in my district, he doesn't go to my school, but basically most of their school found out about it. So a ton of people were showing up at my house that I didn't even know.
Did you know your brain's the most complicated organ in the universe? There is nothing as complicated as the human brain, nothing. Your brain, estimated to be about 3 pounds, has 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, in the brain. And each neuron is connected to other neurons by up to 40,000 individual connections. You actually have more connections in your brain than there are stars in the universe. And even though your brain is only 2% of your body's weight, it uses 20 to 30% of the calories you consume. So of the breakfast you had this morning, or the lunch, or the dinner you're going to have tonight, a third of it, almost a third of it, goes to feed just 2% of your body's weight.
I have a question. If your brain is the most complicated organ in the entire universe, then how can you even hope to understand any of it, you know? I mean, if there's so much to it, how do we know what works?
Well, that's a very good question. And that's one of the reasons that imaging is helpful. And over the weekend, we're going to scan you guys, and we're going to actually look. And what we do is we do a study called brain SPECT imaging. And SPECT looks at blood flow and activity patterns in the brain. So actually look individually at the pattern of activity and the pattern of blood flow in the brain. Now, there's a lot to learn. But what we know, for example, is that certain parts of your brain do certain things.
The front part of the brain, called the prefrontal cortex, is the executive part of the brain. I call it the Jiminy Cricket part of the brain. If you remember Jiminy Cricket in the movie Pinocchio, Jiminy Cricket was Pinocchio's conscience. It helped him decide between right and wrong, helped him keep on the right path for his goals.
So the front part of your brain is called the prefrontal cortex, largest in humans and in any other animal by far. In fact, it's 30% of the human brain, 11% of the chimpanzee brain, 7% of your dog's brain. And I hate to tell you this because I have cats and I love my cat Annabelle. 3.5% of the cat's brain. They're not that smart. And what the prefrontal cortex is involved in is forethought and judgment, impulse control, organization, planning, concentration, thinking about tomorrow and planning your life effectively so that you can make that happen. See, my cat has no forethought, right? I mean, I have pictures of her drinking out of the toilet, even though I've told her, stop it! Right? Right? But this is a very powerful part of the brain.
And this part of the brain really doesn't develop fully until you're about 25. So doing early drug or alcohol use actually damages development.
People, teenagers, adults, they have no clue that when they're smoking pot, they're actually damaging their brain. They have no clue about that because they've never been taught how important your brain is.
Marijuana shuts down a lot of your brain when you use it. You know, it slows your reactions. You know, it's basically just slowing down everything about you.
In all honesty, I have yet to see one truly redeeming quality from any drug. I mean, there's nothing that I've taken that said, wow, you know what, the whole world would be a better place if everybody just smoked pot, or if everybody did acid or took shrooms or whatever. I mean, it was all to distort reality. And I mean, a lot of good the world would be if everybody had a twisted sense of reality.
I was like seeing things all over the place. Not only seeing things, but I thought I was like in a different place. I thought I was like back 5 years old, like at my dad's house for a second. And then I'd say, oh no, I'm here. And then it's like stuff on the walls. It's like, and it was just like this crazy thing. And that got me into wanting to do more and more.
It was a pretty good experience the first time, so I wanted to use a little more. And from then, you know, I went back to the same person, bought more. And just from then on, I just continued using, and then after a while, it just grew to be more and more each day.
There's another part of the brain, it's called the temporal lobes. It's underneath your temples and behind your eyes. It's very important because it's involved with language. So reading, listening, remembering words, being able to name objects, temporal lobe. Also involved with memory. And we know people have Alzheimer's disease. Probably know somebody who's had memory problems as they age. This part of the brain deteriorates. So memory, mood stability, temper control. And we talked about reading. It's also involved in reading social cues. Being able to look at somebody and go, you're interested in what I'm saying, or you're not interested in what I'm saying, right? So being able to read facial expressions is in this part of the brain. So one might think, well, that's really important if you want to get a date. Or it's really important if you want to have a conversation with somebody or make a friend. But you know, the important point is that certain parts of your brain do certain things. When we talked about the back part of your brain, it's heavily involved with direction sense.
I was stumbling around. I couldn't tell which direction was which. And I was walking from my friend's house back to my house, and normally it would be a 20-minute walk, and it took me 2.5 hours.
The back half of the brain sort of receives the world or brings it in, so sight and hearing and taste and touch, the front half of the brain thinks about it and then decides what to do about it and then does it. So one is sort of a receptive function, the other one is a do something about it function. That's why the front part of your brain is so important. And then the green part, it's really not green in real life, but the green part is called the cerebellum. It's involved with coordination, but also thought coordination, being able to think quickly and learn easily. And so one of the things we find is coordination exercises, like dancing or doing certain sports, really help people think better. So playing music is a coordination exercise. It can be very helpful cognitively. But if you think about it, your brain is soft, housed in a hard skull. It does many important things. We should really be protecting it. When you're in the car, you should really wear your seatbelt, right? Because if your head goes through the windshield, even if you live, and many people live after that, they're not the same. They're not their best.
I don't know really what happened. The neurons kind of just stopped, and I kind of said, whoa, I can really feel my acid now, and I just fell back. And then all I remember is, like, time just went away. Like 5 minutes later, I woke up, they were slapping me in the face, Karthi, 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 boom, boom, boom. And I woke up, and I had somebody's finger in my mouth trying to keep him in my tongue. And I guess I had overdosed. I don't know if it was an overdose or sensory overdose or what, but that wasn't fun at all.
Is it still possible to recover from brain injuries in general? I know you've spoken about physical injuries, but I mean, some of the injuries that we bring about on ourselves with drugs and things like that, once you damage your brain that way, is it stuck like that?
Well, the very exciting news, and we have just learned this in the last 10 years, is that your brain can change. Now, obviously, if you do the wrong things for your brain, if you're smoking pot, if you're using drugs, if you use too much caffeine, too much nicotine, it's going to damage brain function. But the brain is very alive, and if you then stop those things and do healthier things, you can actually see the brain change. I wrote this cool book a couple of years ago called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And the reason it has that title is we have done hundreds of before and after scans looking at people who had troubled brains and then teaching them a brain-healthy life and then looking at them again. And what we find when we do the right things, we can balance your brain. So there's a lot that we can recover, especially if you're young. So whatever we see on your scans is good news, because you have what you have, right? It's good to know about what you have. But then the next thing is, what do you do about it? And hopefully you'll do the smart thing, which is love your brain, respect your brain, honor your brain, so that it will work better and you can be your best self.
The party on Friday, the one that was supposed to be my friend's birthday party, was a blast. It was one of the best parties I've ever been to. And people who saw me after that party told me it was one of the best parties they had ever been to.
So he felt very popular over the whole thing. And people that he didn't even know were surrounding him and talking to him.
The next day I cleaned it all up, and that wasn't the big of an issue. The big issue was Saturday night, because earlier in the week, I'd said something to one of my football buddies about, oh yeah, my mom's gonna be out of town this week. I was like, you should throw a party. I thought, oh, well, why not? Because probably not gonna get caught. So he's like, who do you want to come? I'm like, I don't know, invite some people, I don't really care. And when I told one of my friends, invite some people, it turns out that most of my school found out about it. So there'd be random people walking up to me at lunch during that school week going, hey, you're Seth, right? Huge party at your house on Saturday. I was like, oh no.
This was Saturday midday, and I had talked to him a couple of times. And there was just something, there was a tone in his voice, or it wasn't what he said, not even particularly how he said it, but there was just something, a tone that maybe just a mother could know that something's different.
Saturday night came around, me and a bunch of my friends were hanging out at my house. There was probably 50 people there at that point.
At 9 o'clock at night, I called my friends who were supposed to be watching him, and I said, I think he's in over his head. I think something's going on. Would you please go over there? And they said, oh, sure.
I still don't understand it to this day because somehow she knew that I was having a party and she wasn't even on the same continent.
So they got up, a captain in the Navy and his retired Navy wife walked into my home with a minimum of 70 teenagers and more coming down the street at 9 o'clock at night.
I was sitting on the couch, I had a beer in my hand, and she walks in, and I just looked at her, I'm like, wow.
And he knew it was over.
I'm screwed.
Problems in certain parts of your brain tend to cause certain problems. If you hurt the back part of your brain, you're going to have trouble processing what you see. If you have problems in the front part of your brain, you're going to have problems with judgment, problems with impulse control, problems with attention span, organization. You are not going to be able to think before you do things. So you might do things that are really not in your own best interest.
I was up all night the night before doing drugs, before I took my SATs, and I had to drive far to take them. And so I got a very low score. Not, you know, it wasn't like 500 or anything, but it wasn't good enough to get into a really good school.
Had I graduated on time and had I continued with college immediately after high school, you know, I feel that right now I would either be finishing school or I'd actually be starting the career that I want to do.
I wanted to go to like NYU, I wanted to move, and I wanted to be out on my own and everything.
Since using drugs, I haven't been able to accomplish very much of anything. Still working for barely more than minimum wage.
Boom, all gone. No money, in and out of hospitals, heroin just, it's gone. Dreams are dead.
If you have alcoholism in your family, or you have drug addiction in your family, you're at a much higher risk. When your brain is developing, this part is naturally warmer. It's naturally hotter. But if you do bad things to your brain, you're going to change how it functions as well. So it's always a combination. You know, we're born with certain tendencies. I have 3 children, and their biological grandfather had a very serious problem with alcohol. I mean, even to the point where he was abusing people in his family. I told all 3 kids, if you never drink, you'll never have a problem. If you drink, you might have a very serious problem, because people who have it in their family, when they drink, they actually like it a lot more than people who don't have the vulnerability in their family to it.
My dad was an alcoholic. He died when I was 12 years old of cirrhosis of the liver. Earlier, you know, he was a hippie and everything, and then he was dropping acid, shooting heroin in the 60s. The typical things, sold out in the 80s, became a businessman, ran an insurance company, coked out, drinking. That's why my mom and dad got divorced. Eventually it caught up to him, the alcohol, and he died.
I had friends who told me that every time they used drugs, it was a choice that time, that they could either choose to or to not use that, and that they could choose to stop at any time, and I never really believed that.
Once you get into the first one, it's on to the next one. Let's get a little more extreme.
I never believed that they could stop whenever they wanted to, mostly because whenever it came up, it was always a very dire need, very need-based.
At first, I didn't think I was running away from anything. I thought I was using it just because I enjoyed the effects that it gave me. There
was always something that pushed them to that, and it was things that were not going away every time they used it. So if nothing else, the same triggers were coming up over and over, and so that they would continue choosing to use, if that's really the choice that it was.
Whenever an instance would occur in my life, that the next thing I would do was go back to whatever drug I was using at the time. So then I could realize that, you know, it's not just because I want to use it, it's because I'm trying to hide from something, I'm trying to get away and forget something.
What we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to scan everybody's brain. We're going to take a picture of the activity levels. And what we're going to see is 3 things. Areas of your brain that work well, areas of your brain that are underactive and areas of your brain that are overactive. And from that, we'll actually be able to see, is there damage? If there is, what's the level of damage? And we'll be able to come up with ideas on how to fix it or how to optimize it so that you can have the best brain possible, because that correlates to the best life possible.
I'm just worried that my brain cells are going to be gone and they're never coming back. So basically, I was smart, I had potential, and boom, it's all gone because I wanted to have a little bit of fun.
Whatever we see tomorrow is good news, because you have what you have. Now, if there's something I can do or recommend to make it better, well, that's very exciting. And I want all of you to feel excited about the information.
I've seen a few pictures of the effects of certain drugs on your brain, but it only has that one particular drug. And I've used quite a few drugs, quite a bit. So I'm just wondering, you know, the result, the effects that it's had on my brain.
Now, if you've done something that hurts your brain, you absolutely want to know that, because if you've done it, you want to stop it. I mean, that's really the sign of intelligent life. New information, and now you can use that information to change your behavior. So, if we see that tomorrow, we're going to get a plan to get it better.
Pacing in a tiny hotel room, wringing my hands thousands of miles away, I knew he was okay. I didn't know what extent had happened. And when they got back and called me, I had the mom fill me in on what they walked in on, and then Seth got on the phone.
I talked to my mom, and she basically hardly even talked to me.
I mean, at that point, what could be said? I was very upset. I said, Seth, we talked about this. I cannot believe you did this to me and to us and to your friends. You put everybody at risk.
I don't remember exactly what she said because I was pretty tired and I was pretty preoccupied with, oh my God, I just got caught. So I don't remember exactly what she said, but I know it wasn't a fun conversation, I can tell you that much.
Well, I was in for some more surprises. And that was the next day I spoke to a young gentleman that was staying with us. He was 20. And he thought I knew about Friday night.
She didn't even know about the one on Friday until one of my friends inadvertently told her about it. She was on the phone with him.
And he started talking. And I said, Friday night?
Yeah, Friday. And she was totally talking about Saturday. She's like, oh, tell me about Friday.
So then I had to call Seth back. And I said, now you tell me about Friday night. And he denied and was going around in circles. And I said, stop it, I already know.
That was not fun.
And I had given him excuses before this. Oh, it got out of hand, kids don't know. I was making, there were no more excuses after I found that out.
For the next month or so, my life was pretty much over.
So when I did get home, he came to greet me, you know, the usual hug, and I don't think I hugged him back, and that's very rare. I was livid, and I was hurt.
It was pretty scary. Like, I've never really been afraid of my mom, but she was mad.
And I walked in, and my beautiful tile floor was sticky like I have never known it.
The carpets had to be cleaned because there were some stains, and a couple sprinkler heads got broken.
There were bashes on the wall.
And the piping under the driveway started to leak.
I think, now nobody will collaborate with me on this, but I believe there was some pot smoking in the garage.
It was basically completely filled with smoke, like you could walk in there and hardly see in front of you.
I'm like looking around my own home as if I didn't know what I was going to find.
Total damage money-wise, it was...
Oh my gosh, I can't even think about that.
I lost my mom's trust, which was a bigger consequence than the punishments that I received, because after that she wouldn't go out of town for a while and she didn't really trust me, and I had had her trust for so long I didn't really know what it was like not to have it.
My greatest fear is that he doesn't relate to the seriousness of alcohol and drugs.
I know that some of those kids that were getting really wasted at my parties, I probably shouldn't have been assisting them in that, but I guess I didn't really think about it at the time.
I grew up with this in my home, and it hurt us. It changed us.
I know on her side we have alcoholism and diabetes in the family, and I know on my dad's side as well we have a little bit of alcoholism.
And I know genetically that my children come at this with a vulnerability. And so I would like them to recognize that seriousness.
She doesn't want that to happen to me. She doesn't want that to happen to my kids either, for me to become an alcoholic or something.
I mean, there's so many things where this could go, and I don't want to lose it.
It can make you die young, and I don't want to die young.
Well, what we look at in this study is how your brain works. And we look for three things: areas of your brain that work well, areas of your brain that are underactive, and areas of your brain that are overactive. Now, overall, your brain is really healthy. It's just an area that's a little bit underactive compared to what we would like to see. Now, there are probably a couple of explanations for that. The 3 or 4 cups of coffee you have a day.
Okay.
Caffeine constricts blood flow to the brain. Even though it sort of wakes you up and gives you more energy, that's not really great for your brain. So compared to some of the other brains, your brain is fabulous. When I talk to people who've done a fair amount of sports, their cerebellum's often great. So sports without brain injuries is really good for... See this red spot here at the top back? That's very cool. We find that is an area that actually goes with intelligence. I would be grateful for that. And actually, in many ways, just be grateful for your whole brain, because it works wonderfully. I don't get to see brains usually that look this nice. Your brain really looks great. When you look at the brain from this, your very beautiful brain really turns out to be too active. So you can see why somebody would want to use alcohol or drugs as a way to settle it down. Now, there are better ways to do that.
How exactly would I go about calming it down so that I don't feel like I would have to drink to get rid of my sadness or worries or anxiety?
Exercise, changing your diet, using supplements. There's options besides drinking to calm it down, or using heroin to calm it down, or using downers, pain pills to calm it down. You can see that there's this little dent here. You don't want that dent there. Your brain sort of looks a little dehydrated. In your brain, sort of the mood and anxiety centers are really active. And this part of your brain, the brain's gear shifter, is really active. What was your sort of drug of choice?
Well, mostly marijuana or alcohol.
And about what marijuana and alcohol do?
Depressants.
They calm down brain
Yeah.
function. And so, you know, one could see why you would do it. The problem is it prematurely ages your brain. It makes it look sick.
10 years of drug use, and I just barely escaped. I feel kind of like I've been playing Russian roulette for 10 years, and somehow I just missed the chamber with the shell in it all those years, because I could have really killed myself.
So your brain is the one on the top. And what we see in your brain is these are your temporal lobes. They're not working very hard. And the temporal lobes are very important because they're involved with memory. You can have problems learning, and you're at a part in your life where learning's really important. Learning a job, learning about relationships, learning how to manage your money, and so on. It sort of looks a little like a wrinkled sheet on top, and that's sort of some toxicity.
That's a lot of damage to be inflicting on yourself.
Compared to a healthy brain, it's not that good. Your brain is the one on the top.
Okay.
What we think of as a really healthy brain, the one on the bottom. It doesn't look good. Your temporal lobes, this is where learning, memory is. They're really underactive.
Okay.
Front part,
Yeah.
it's really underactive. I would think this is a 70-year-old's brain.
I didn't realize that there was that much damage.
So what I'm going to put on the bottom to compare to yours is someone who's abused methamphetamine for a number of years.
Oh, okay. That does
Okay.
good.
Do you think the guy on the bottom is doing well in worker relationships?
I wouldn't say he's doing well on pretty much anything.
Not good. He's actually been arrested 5 times. And compared to this one, yours is pretty healthy.
Yeah.
You keep using.
That's
Yours is going to look like this.
Right. I think I should have never have done any drugs, and I think that I will never do another drug.
Now is the time to take brain health seriously. So the real question is, which brain do you want?
Right.
I have everybody's brain, so I'm going to give you a copy of it.
Thank you.
Basically what we saw is the people who've yet never used drugs have had healthier brains. That makes sense. The exciting thing is even if you can see damage in your brain, like somebody took an ice cream scooper and scooped parts of it out, what we're looking at is how your brain functions. And if you can take the images and combine that with the decision, I need to take care of my brain. I need to think about my brain, love my brain, nurture it, then odds are over time you'll be at your potential. Let's talk just briefly about a couple of things you can do to keep your brain healthy. And this really applies to all of us. The first thing is protect your brain. The brain is very soft. Your skull is really hard. Do not put yourself at risk for brain injuries. You know, wear your seatbelts. Don't ride motorcycles. Wear your helmet if you're riding a bicycle. I mean, really think about protecting it. I tell people golf is good. Tennis is terrific. Table tennis is the world's best sport because it doesn't put you at risk for brain injury. In protecting the brain, avoid toxic substances. I mean, obviously, we've been talking about alcohol is toxic for the brain, as is marijuana, as is heroin and painkillers, LSD, ecstasy. Ecstasy is actually terrible for the brain because it depletes, means it gets rid of a certain neurotransmitter that helps people with their mood. And they feel better, and then they feel worse. Nicotine constricts blood flow to the brain. It actually prematurely ages your brain. And if we looked at your brain, I know you're smoking, it's older than you are, and you don't want an old brain. Caffeine. Caffeine constricts blood flow to the brain. Okay? Now, if you have a cup of coffee a day, that's not a big deal. But if you're having 6, your brain will prematurely age itself, and it will end up looking older than you are. Make sure you get enough sleep. People who are chronically sleep deprived have lower overall activity in their brain. And learn how to manage stress, like do deep breathing, meditation, because people who are chronically exposed to stress, we actually know it starts to kill cells in the memory centers of the brain. So deal with the stress in your life. The next thing to do is to eat healthy. How we eat in this country is a disaster. And even as teenagers and young adults, it's critical. You are what you eat. Lean protein, complex carbohydrates, that means more vegetables, and fruits, and get rid of the simple sugars in your life and a lot of the fat. And when they say supersize it at the fast food place, say no, because people who eat less actually live longer and their brains are better. Multiple vitamin every day. It's really healthy because we just don't have balanced diets. And if you take 100% multiple vitamins, actually a study from England, where kids who did that on a regular basis, they did better in school. Right? They just had the nutrients they needed. Exercise. Physical exercise boosts blood flow to the brain. Does so many good things to your brain. Helps your heart work better, so your heart can actually get good blood flow. And blood is what delivers oxygen and fuel to your brain. So exercise is just critical to keeping your brain healthy. And mental exercise. Even though you might not be in school, keep learning. Your brain actually grows with new learning, which also means turn off the television and stop playing as many video games, because those things are really not very healthy for the brain. And don't believe every thought you have. All of us have thoughts that lie.
Just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's real. It's just a thought. And if thoughts are lying to you, I call them ants, automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come in your mind automatically and ruin your day. If you don't correct them, you can get depressed or you can get anxious. And if you have issues with your brain, if it's working too hard, or if it's not working hard enough, you want to work to balance it because your brain is involved in everything you do. So what would you tell, Karthi, what would you tell a 13-year-old who's like being a little bit pressured by his friends to start smoking pot? Oh, it won't hurt you. There's nothing the matter with it. What would you tell him?
I would say actually don't do anything, drugs or anything, because somebody else is doing it. You might think that you know everything. I thought I knew everything when I was a 13-year-old kid. You know, I thought I was smarter than the world. You're not.
If I had a friend who was about to start using drugs or alcohol, the first thing I would do was plead with them and tell them that, you know, that wasn't something that they had to do and there were other options, and I'd have to inform them and I'd say, do you know what you're doing?
Who would have made a different decision if you had this information in 10th grade?
And I think all of us would have made a different decision if we had this information earlier.
I've got information right now that shows me that, you know, escaping from your problems doesn't mean that you're not running into new ones. Just because you can escape your mom and dad for, you know, a night doesn't mean that you're going to be able to escape your brain, you know. You've got to live with it.
In my mid-teens, as I started setting goals for myself and making plans for what I wanted to do with my life, I always just had a subconscious realization that drugs and alcohol wouldn't help me get there.
In the long run, everything catches up to you, and the long-term effects are just, you know, overall negative. So I feel that the best way for me to have my child, you know, growing up with a good father, and the way for him to live a happy childhood, you know, if I can take care of myself, I'll be better equipped to take care of him.
And you need your brain for that.
Absolutely.
Because without your brain, with your brain being polluted, if you will, you can't be the best dad.
Everything that I saw in school about it, you know, I found out one day that it's all true and it's all happening to me.
I know a lot of people don't take into consideration, oh, this might affect my brain, or I might not be able to do this when I'm older.
Every decision that you make, I mean, you look at all these little dents in your brain and you're like, okay, that was 8th grade when I smoked out with my friend after school. That was every morning drinking a shot of Jack Daniels, you know, stuff like that. It's like, oh man, every decision was really, really right there.
Now that you've seen the scientific proof that drugs and alcohol damage your brain, it's critical to answer this question. Which brain do you want? Whether you're at a party, whether you're feeling depressed, whether you're feeling pressured to use drugs, you have to answer the question, which brain do you want? It's also important to pass on the information, to have your friends and the people you love answer the question. You can show them our website, where you can see hundreds of images, healthy images, drug-affected images, and when you look at them, you want a healthy brain. Your life matters. What you do day to day in your life matters to the health of your brain, and the health of your brain determines the happiness in your life. Which brain do you want?
still trusts me somewhat, and like I've gained much of her trust back, so that's good. But I think in time it'll be fully healed. And I mean, it's only been 4 months, and in a teenager's life, that's like a lifetime. But in a parent's life, that's a blink of an eye.
He has a much greater appreciation of mother's intuition. I can't tell you what it was in that phone call, but you know, he respects that, and he's scared.
Your brain's involved in everything you do. I wondered where the ice cream scoop came from that took a big chunk out of my brain.
Everything that I saw in school about it, I found out one day that it's all true and it's all happening to me.
Your brain can change.
I didn't want to have to go and tell my mom, I'm a heroin addict.
Everybody was just kind of almost wasted the entire time. After a while, I realized that I didn't want to do that to myself.
I'd like to just be able to think normally.
Don't worry, Mom. I know what can happen. I wouldn't throw a party.
She was mad.
I always just had a subconscious realization that drugs and alcohol wouldn't help me get there.
A lot of good the world would be if everybody had a decent sense of reality.
I'm screwed.